G'day everybody, and for those who have come in late, you're listening to Expand the Phantom podcast. My name is Jermaine, and today I am joined by Dan. How are you, Dan?
Very good, Jermaine. Delighted to be talking to you on a Saturday morning.
That's what everyone says. No, I'm looking forward to today. This is a huge honour that we're going to be talking to one of the artists and creators of the Defenders of the Earth TV series. Now, before we introduce the guest, Dan, do you have a childhood memory of the Defenders of the Earth TV series?
I wish I did, but I grew up in the wrong part of Australia, and we didn't have Defenders of the Earth on the ABC, which was the only channel that we could get in the Northern Territory. So, unfortunately, even though I'm in the prime age bracket for the series, I missed seeing it as a kid. So, watched it instead as a young adult, I suppose, and recently, dug out the DVD again to share with my kids who are now in the right age.
Yeah. Well, I'm very much similar. I didn't watch it as a child, but I watched it as a 22-year-old during my uni days. I splurged and brought myself a box set. This is actually the slipcase here. And then I watched it over Christmas because I didn't go home for that Christmas period. So this was my nighttime viewing. And now my daughter, who's actually 5 at the age at the time, has actually watched the whole series herself. And she knows the song. She's got a little dance routine for the song. And she loves the Phantom, Jedda, Sisha, who's the Panther, and Zuffy as well. And they're her favourite characters out of the TV series. And she loves it. So it's a multi-generational TV show. So before we go on too much further, we'll introduce Rick Hoberg, who we'll find out soon what he did on the TV show. But Rick, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now, did I pronounce your last name right, or did I get it wrong?
Yeah, Oberg, exactly as you said it. Yeah.
Yes, I got one right.
152 episodes in, we've finally got one.
I've been called Humbug and Oberg
and unfortunately, I've got a bad reputation, I guess you could call it, of getting names wrong. Thank you for joining us, Rick.
It's my pleasure, like I said. It should be fun.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to this. So what I was wondering is, to start off, if you can start telling us a little bit about yourself, like your age or your range, where you grew up, what you studied, and then how you got into the comics or the animation area, and then we can just kind of go from there.
Okay. Well, I actually, about a year and a half ago, I retired from the animation union. I'm going on 68 at this point. And I still do work here and there. It's just I don't do a lot of animation storyboard work anymore, just because it's rather grueling work. It's hard to do. It gets harder every year because there's more requirements. But I started out wanting to draw comic books. That was my first interest. And one of the things that really got me fascinated with animation is when Johnny Quest started when I was a kid. Yeah. And that show just blew my mind. I mean, I just really couldn't believe there was a show on TV about a kid my age who was going off on all these science fiction adventures. And years later, my first job in the business was at Hanna-Barbera on their Godzilla show that was done during the 70s. And the guy producing the show was Doug Wiley, the guy who created Johnny Quest. So it was a great moment for me, and he taught me a lot. He kind of mentored me, but like most mentors in that business, in this business that is cartooning, they're pretty hard taskmasters, and they need to be to keep you going where you want to go. Anyway, that led to working on shows like Super Friends and so forth at Hanna-Barbera, and fairly quickly I moved over to Ruby Spears to work on Thundar the Barbarian, which was just a show I really wanted to work on. And that was a really terrific experience. And there I met a whole bunch of other guys in the business, and my horizons expanded, and I ended up at Marvel. And in my second tour at Marvel, after I had left Marvel the first time to go work for DC Comics, I came back and pretty much worked right into Defenders of the Earth, because the head guy creatively over there was Will Mineo. Will kind of guided everybody. He was a producer, but he was kind of treated like an overall art director, producer, the whole thing. And Will and I had been friends for a long time. We both met on the same day that I went to interview for Godzilla at Hanna-Barbera, and he was there for his first job too. So we've kind of come up in the business together. And anyway, he chose me to be his right-hand guy on Defenders of the Earth. So we did all the presentation stuff or oversaw it. And we had a great stable of artists to work with. It was just stunningly good because you had all these guys who had just come in from the Philippines, like Nestro Redondo and Alex Nino and people like that. And there was also comic book artists like Sean McManus, and Jim Valentino did a little work for us and stuff. Anyway, that's how I ended up on Defenders of the Earth. And I'd always loved the King Features characters, particularly Flash Gordon, because I fell in love with Raymond Flash Gordons from the 40s. But I also probably was introduced first to the Phantom because I read that strip pretty regularly in local newspapers. Mm-hmm. And Mandrake I knew of just because if you know about those characters, you're going to know about Mandrake the Magician.
Yeah.
So it was fun to do that, and it was fun to get involved there.
So about what year was that you that the genesis for the series started up?
Boy, the 80s are a bit of a blur for me because I've done so many things. So I'm going to guess about 1983 or 4 we were producing that show.
Wow.
So because when I came in at Marvel the first go round, when they were in a small building on Sepulveda Boulevard and near Ventura Boulevard in the valley, we started the Spider-Man show that led into Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Basically, they're an overlapping show because the Spider-Man show, 26 episodes, I think is what we did. And it was going to be syndicated, but it was meant to be something as a showpiece for the studio. And NBC picked up Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends because they wanted something to compete with Super Friends over on ABC. And we had a lot of the guys who'd worked on it, including we picked up Don Jurwich, the director, who was the main director on Super Friends for years. And Don was a great guy to work with, wonderful director. So anyway, me and Will Mineo, again, Will was there, and Larry Houston were the 3 main guys. And added onto that came Russ Heath and Mike Sikowski after a while, and a really talented animator named Dick Sebast, as well as a lot of old-timers from the business. Like I can name Art Leonardi was there, and there was a few others. The names don't come to mind, but there was a lot of really great old-time animators, too, that they had there. Because this was the old DePatie Freeling studio, so they'd been doing all of the Pink Panther stuff and so forth and so on. So they had a good mix of guys. From there, we did the Hulk show and G.I. Joe. Then the studio had to expand, so they moved over to a big studio just a little ways from there, maybe 2 miles from there on a bigger boulevard. And that's when I came back, and we ended up starting to develop the show. And we had the designers I've mentioned, like I'm going to show you in a bit artwork that was pre-show stuff, that is, it was lead-up stuff, concept stuff, by Alex Nino and Nestro Redondo and myself, as well as I've got some final art that was done by me and Nestro Redondo for the titles of the show and things like that. So these were, I don't know, if you guys familiar with Nestro Redondo or Alex Nino?
I've heard of the names, but
just fantastic artists, fantastic artists.
Yeah.
So we had guys like that, but Will and I really ran the whole thing. We were the guys who handed out stuff or did it ourselves and had other people inking it. So we got what we wanted, and that was a really good thing to do because it enabled me to also design most of the main characters. We worked with other people, of course, but when it came to the final designs for the show, I designed Flash and Phantom, who is, of course, just the Phantom. There's not a lot to change there. As well as Rick and Jedda and Mandrake. And Lothar was my finish over Will Minio's basic design. Will came up with that military look for him.
Yeah.
And Ming was, in the end, a combination of me and a few other people.
Okay, cool. So, just a question. A lot of our listeners are probably are familiar with comic book drawing. What's the difference between a comic book and an animation? Are you able just to be able to tell us like the process between an animation and what's? I'm assuming that if you've got 20 frames per second or something, there's a lot more that's involved with an animation. Is that correct or?
Oh yeah, animation and comics they overlap a lot in design and the approach to storytelling, but comic books are told in design where animation, like any film, is told in time. That is, you can do a panel in a Spider-Man comic and have Spider-Man leaping in, saying 4 or 5 pieces of dialogue, punching out 5 guys at a time, but you can't do that in one shot in animation. You actually have to think that out, and you have to stage it properly. And so the difference there is just that animation takes time to go where it's going, where comics are going to be about the design of the page, getting as many of the elements in there as you can, and just keeping the flow moving from one drawing to the next. You don't need to worry about that in animation because there's cutting and movement of the film and so forth. Design-wise, especially back in the day we were doing those things, it was a very, you had to take a simpler approach to the characters than you would in a comic book. You could add a lot of shadowing in a comic. You could add a lot of, cross-hatching, anything like that, all sorts of design elements. Zipatone, for instance. You know what zipatone is? It's that tone pattern, dot pattern, and so forth. So, for instance, doing both, because I started in comics working for Russ Manning on Overseas Tarzan comics. Russ was the guy drawing the Tarzan comic strip at the time. And then Marvel Comics hired me via Roy Thomas to work on What If and some Conan stuff, and eventually Star Wars. So I know both worlds, and I know that you have to simplify your designs for animation, but you still want to keep as much of the original as you can. Some characters, like I can tell you Spider-Man, is pretty easy to do because Ditko just created a wonderful design there. It's all about the shape, and the webbing design defines the form, and things like the eyes and so forth are all very simple. It's harder to keep track of that when you're animating it, because things like the webbing can get a little crazy. If you've watched any of these earlier shows, you'll see times when the webbing, instead of going downwards like a web spreading out, they take the things and they bring them upwards, so that you've got this odd pattern happening. But most of the time they're able to get it right. Other characters, for instance, Iceman in the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends show, had to be completely redesigned for animation so that you get planes to work from. That is, you'd see edges of the ice and how it defined his form. For me, it was pretty easy and fun to do because these were all favorite characters of mine to begin with. I went in with a real love for all of these comic book and comic strip characters. Thus, it's more about simplifying, but still doing really good, solid drawing.
So in Defenders of the Earth, then, would the Phantom would have been one of the easier ones to incorporate into animation then, because he's a pretty simple design? Yeah,
he's just a purple leotard with, and when we did the show, I'd have to look, but I think we took the stripes off of the underpants, basically, trunks, and because that would have been a problem to deal with. And other than that, he's pretty simple to do. His are all simple forms, like Mandrake is too. Even Flash is is simple. The big problem with Flash is there is no definite outfit for Flash Gordon. The thing that most defines him is the lightning bolt red shirt. Other than that, the pants and boots and everything constantly changed in the comic strip. In fact, by the time we were doing it, he was wearing more astronaut type stuff, I believe. I didn't follow it as closely at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of our questions, was about the Phantom striped trunks. But it's good to hear, I guess, from the person who actually designed him, that was actually the reason why they were dropped.
And you can, if you think about it, you can see where the problems could come in that you could have a scene with the Phantom with them going in the right direction, which I believe is right to left. They go down, isn't that correct? Yeah, they're right to left, I believe. And you could easily in animation have one scene like that, and then somebody screws up in the next one and flips them around so they're left to right, or they don't put the black and the purple, is it, or blue? Is it blue or purple? Yeah, you put those stripes incorrect at some point. That is, the blue is suddenly the black, and so forth. And so on.
Yeah.
So it was just a decision by the producers to do that. A guy like me probably fought to keep the original, because I'm a real stickler for that kind of stuff. Only when I know something has to be changed will I do it. Other than that, I'm a pretty big pain in the butt when it comes to that. So,
it would have saved a lot of time not having to look at the underwear every time.
yeah, well, also you have to realize we were really crunching this stuff out in animation. The people who were animating it over in Korea were having to turn out tremendous volumes of stuff. And you'll see a lot of mistakes still left in the film at the time because they didn't have time for retakes. Some of the most hilarious retakes are in shows like Super Friends from years back during the 70s, where you'll see actual stuff on screen where Superman would be talking to Wonder Woman or something, and he'd turn his head to look the other way and his mouth would still be over here. So there was always retake problems that we had to deal with. So you wanted to simplify as much as possible.
Yeah. So you made mention of Korea there. So I would just want to go over the flow of the creation. So you and Will did the storyboards, and then did it go?
There was a lot of guys doing storyboards. A ton of them. Mostly us.
So could you just go over the flow, from I guess you get a script, and then what does it go to a storyboard?
Yeah, exactly. The script is handed to the director-producer, which is what they called us at the time, even though we were basically directors. And you would have a staff to work with. I had a small crew, and we had each had our own guys to work with. And there was also a pool of artists that we could pick from if we needed to. And quite often we could freelance out to other guys outside the studio. So you take the script and break it into 3 to 4 sections. 3 was optimum because there was 3 acts in a show. The first act, second act, and third act, they were always broken down like that. And that way each guy who was doing each act could keep track of what was going on and just communicate with the next guy in line who was doing the second act, how they were doing the direction, and that is what direction characters were going in, so that the next guy could pick it up and keep the characters moving in the same direction to hook up to the next act. And once in a while we'd have to break it up a little more because we were on a deadline crunch, and or some guy would fail in his deadline and you'd have to pull other people in to finish some of his work. And that was common in the business at that point. So from there, during that period, I should say, we would have models being done for supporting characters or guest stars, and we'd have props being designed, and we'd have backgrounds being designed, and quite often at that point we'd be taking design ideas directly off the storyboards. That is, the background designers, for instance, were really under the gun all the time, so it was easier for them if the background was basically designed by the storyboard artist, then was handed to them to do a finish. And there was then a cohesiveness between what we were doing. from there, it was the storyboards were turned in, revised, and edited. So, and that was generally my job. I would go through and do all the redesigns and re-storytelling that needed to be done. And after all these elements had been finished, it was timed by a timing director so that you had specific timing for each shot and timing on how long it took a character to do something. This was all sent overseas and the animation was created from there. Then when it was brought back, it was edited and put together as a film.
Wow.
At that point, I don't think the voice acting was being done prior to the storyboards, which is always optimum. We were doing it at the same time, so quite often the voice direction was being done, the voice recording was being done separately, and we would make sure that it hooked up when it was sent overseas. On that particular show, I wasn't involved in the voice directing or casting because there were two head supervising producers, guys named Bill Hutton and Tony Love, who kind of oversaw the whole thing, while me and the two rookie directors, because there was another guy and me who were new at this, but the heads of the studio really wanted me involved, and they wanted me to learn the ropes on this show.
Yeah. So just here, for those who are listening to podcasts, I'm about to show you a couple of things. This is actually a script of a Defenders of the Earth TV show. This one is The White Hole of Ming, which is part 2 of 5, which was joined together as the movie.
Who wrote that? Who's the writer?
The script, Larry Parr.
Yep. And who else? Anybody else?
On this one, which is episode 8, I believe it is. This one's by Arthur Bryan.
Yep. So Larry was one of the head writers at the studio, and he's the guy who ended up being teamed with Larry, Will, and I to do Pride of the X-Men when we did the X-Men teaser show that we wanted to use to sell to Fox.
Okay. And then another thing that I've actually got is I've actually got a photocopy of a storyboard. It's out of order, but so for those who are on YouTube, here's just a couple of shots.
Gotcha.
Of some storyboards. It's fascinating watching that, and I must admit I don't fully understand the whole animation process, but seeing these little 6 little squares and then the what do you call it, the storyboard and the story going over it, there seems to be a lot of work going into it for 20-minute show.
Yeah, tremendous amount. You're going to have, in shows these days, I think you get upwards of 450 to 600 scenes in a show. That's not drawings, that's scenes, because each scene can have from 1 panel to 15 panels. I mean, it depends on what action is going on and what's happening. So in those days, we were doing a number of panels, but also we were telling stories more like comic books. That is, where we would get away from it, we could get away with it. We would just do a held shot that told a lot of story, much in line with Johnny Quest, the original Johnny Quest, which was basically a moving comic book. It quite often relied on just what we would call held cells and just drawings of characters and scenes. For instance, a held cell, for instance, is, you remember Johnny Quest, the title sequence?
Yeah.
The sky and stuff. The jet was in a held cell. That is just a painted cell that they were moving a background behind and overlays in front of to give the illusion of movement. But nothing was actually moving on the jet. And so we did a lot of that kind of stuff as well. And I actually love doing that stuff. That stuff is just fun.
It makes sense, because then it's easier to have 3 pieces moving than it is having to create different images for that, for the same illusion.
Oh, you can't actually do it on the budgets we had. And even today, the shows done for TV are simpler in many cases. And they use a lot of great techniques these days. We've got the advantage of having CGI we can use so they can create three-dimensional props and backgrounds. In fact, these days when I do a storyboard, I'm quite often given what they call an FBX file, which is a three-dimensional file of something, such as when I was working on the Avengers show. Was it the Avengers? I think it was Spider-Man, the most recent Spider-Man show. We were given a three-dimensional moving New York City. So you could just turn it, take a screenshot of it, and drop it right into your storyboard, which is great. Yeah. Takes a while, but it's great stuff to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had to keep this stuff simple, and everything was hand-drawn or hand-painted at that point.
Yeah.
So obviously a lot of work. It's also a cast of thousands, by the sounds of it. Approximately how many people would have contributed to any one episode?
In the pre-production part of it, the production pre-production that I'm involved in or was involved in, there would have been myself and writers, and so let's say there's like 4 or 5 directors on a show like this, because we had to do 65 half hours in a really short amount of time, so they needed to get them done by a number of people. And we had prop designers and, like I said, and background artists and such. So just there, you've got 20, 25 people doing that, storyboards. And once you send it overseas, you've got hundreds to thousands of people working in the animation area. So any one show could have, let's just shoot a ballpark here, 3,000 people working on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
These studios in Korea are just packed to the rafters with animators.
Did you ever go over there and see him in action?
Yeah, I went over and directed some Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends when the show was nearing its end in pre-production. That is, we'd finished our final storyboards and stuff. The head of the studio, Lee Gunther, approached me and said, "I'd like to send you overseas to overlook what's going on over there." And I said, "Well, Lee, I'm a comic book artist, a storyboard guy. I don't know that much about animation. I know how it works, but I don't actually animate." He says, "I don't care. I just want your story sense." So I spent 3.5, 4 months living in Seoul, Korea.
Oh.
Fun. I enjoyed it. I had a blast.
Must have been interesting to actually see the stable of artists, I guess, in action.
Oh yeah, it was it was a sweatshop. Let me tell you, those poor kids were working their buns off.
Yeah.
I would see the same. I would leave in the evening after 8 to 10 hours working and see the same kids still working the next morning, washing their hairs in the sink, and then going back to the drawing board. It was kind of brutal to watch.
Wow.
But they were doing wonderful work, and the head animators were really talented guys.
So I was just wondering if we can go a little bit back with some of the characters. Now, I've heard a story. I don't know. I'm hoping you'll be able to shed a little bit more light on it. But I was told that that the children for Flash Gordon and the Phantom were originally the other way around. That the Phantom originally had a son, and Jedda was originally Flash Gordon's daughter. And then there was, as the story goes that I've heard, that there was a marketing team or bunch of experts that decided that it would be better to swap it around. Is that true?
It's something like that, because it was more King Features. They were pretty involved here, and they had a lot of say in this. And the idea for having the Phantom have a son, obviously, is because the Phantom is a multi-generational character. A son always takes it on. And this was meant to be an idea where when it was all talked over, that it would be more interesting to have the next Phantom destined to be a woman, you know. And they just, you know, they were going to have a son and a daughter in there, so this worked out well for them. And instead of Mandrake having a child, they decided it would be more interesting for Lothar, because, you know, that way you've got Lothar having a much more involved relationship with the others and his child than you ever would have had in the comic strip, where he was just kind of an aide de camp, a sidekick.
Yeah. So Now, I got another bit of show and tell. I'm not sure if you can see that. This is a promo piece that I picked up on eBay recently. Now, in this one, it has actually got Jedda, who's there, has got blonde hair, and then you've got you got LJ, who looks similar as what he does. The orphan child for Mandrake, whose name
I forget. I forget what the kid's name was. Started with the kid.
Kashan.
Yeah, I think that's it. Kashan. Yeah.
Yeah, he looks different, and then this Rick, I'm assuming that's who it would be, also looks different. He's got black hair, so I'm assuming that this is one of the pieces where it actually had the Phantom as his son. So,
yes.
Do you remember this piece?
I've never seen before, but it looks. I'd actually have to see it clearer. But I believe it's E.R. Cruz, the Filipino artist who drew that. It looks like Cruz's work, and he was in the studio also. So yeah, this was stuff that was done probably before we actually kicked the show off. So there was a lot of idea stuff going around. They would always have somebody do up a presentation piece to show stuff and sell the client on stuff. And King Features, like I said, was really involved, so they wanted to see this kind of stuff. And they were paying for the show, so Marvel was more than willing to take the time to do it.
Interesting.
Do you remember? Sorry, do you remember any of the key names of the people out of King Features who were directly overseeing the show, or it was more just King Features as a?
Yeah, not at all. I wasn't involved there. They didn't want we artists, influencing what was being discussed in the business end very much. You're more than likely to sell them on something, and then the bosses go, "What did you do that for? That's going to cost us thousands of dollars."
Fair enough.
But there was a lot of freedom to take it in places we wanted to take it and work with characters we wanted to work with. And we had the entire pretty much King Features stable to work with. So I immediately jumped on it and asked to do Prince Valiant, which we got to do a show with Prince Valiant and Arn and Alita in it.
Yeah, I remember that episode.
Yeah.
There was a lot of Phantom elements as well. Like there was the one of my favorite ones was the battle between the two brothers, Kit and Kurt.
I've forgotten that episode.
So
I've watched these in years myself. So.
Yeah, and then there was the Skyband or the Skyband came involved as well in one of the later episodes. So did you like? So, do you have like a favorite episode or a favorite moment with the show?
Yeah, it's the Prince Valiant episode because I really worked my butt off on it, and I pulled them two outside guys who were really excellent storyboard artists, and then I storyboarded a section of it myself, which was the only time I did a full act on the show because I just wanted it to be as good as I could make it at the time.
Yeah.
And as I'll show you, I have designs for it by Nestro Redondo of Valiant and Arn in the stuff I'm going to show you.
Okay, cool. Did we want to go have a look at it now?
Sure, we can do that. We can start with those. Let me share my screen here after I go first of all, and then I'll show you some Phantom stuff because I've got some Phantom designs that were done by. One was done by Russ Heath, and the other, Russ Heath's work. He's a very well-known comic book artist. And the other was done by a guy named Kurt Connors, really talented guy. Anyway, I'll start off here.
So for those who are listening to it on the podcast, audio only, Rick is about to show us some stuff. We'll explain it as we go, but if you wanted to watch it on YouTube, it will be on YouTube as well for you to have a bit of a look at as well.
So here we go. There's Valiant. That's drawn by Nestro Redondo. Again, one of the great comic book and comic book artists and creative illustrators to come out of the Philippines. He was kind of the godfather, along with Alfredo Alcala, of the Philippine movement of comics. As you can see, he's just a stunningly good artist. He was just great. He worked on things for DC Comics a lot. He did some Swamp Thing work. He did Rima the Jungle Girl, and he did those beautiful Bible books that Joe Kubert laid out and wrote. So Nestor was just a stunningly good artist. This is Valiant. Here's one of Arn. Just let me know if I'm moving too fast through this stuff.
Yep. No, it's good. It's just such clear and simple lines, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Nestor was one of the great artists. He was just terrific at this. And he was perfect for animation because he could simplify and still keep really solid forms on the page. From here, I'll go to some character designs. Let me start with, I mentioned the Phantom. There's one by Russ Heath. Everybody thinks I drew these when they see the RH, but that's Mr. Heath. When you see my name, my initials in red on these, that's just me signing off on these as the director.
Okay.
So there's one by Russ Heath, which we like. And here's a turnaround by Kurt Connors, who was a guy who worked on Thundar, the Barbarian, with me. And he also was one of the main layout guys on the original heavy metal movie.
So really, these are obviously all hand drawn, and you've scanned them in since, Rick?
Yeah, these are all originals that I own in my collection that I kept. And yeah, these are scanned, and this would have actually been a rough. So you can tell because it's in blue line and there's ragged edges to some of the lines and such, but it's a real nice turnaround. It really works for what you want to do in animation. The problem with doing stuff like this turnaround for animation and trying to keep it faithful to what you see in comics or the comic strips is quite often, let's say, a favorite 3/4 shot, like this one we're looking at, the face. When you turn it, the side angle may not look exactly like you see in the comic strips, but it's accurate for the turn. That is for the moving in space. So those are problems that we deal with a lot. So something like this probably would have been cleaned up with a little more attention toward what the character looked like in the comic strip or in the comic books.
Okay.
Other stuff is.
I noticed the drawings on the of this one compared to the Russ Heath one. This one's a little bit more, lack of a better term, blockier. Like the lines are more blocky. Would that just be because it's a rough, or would that be his art style as well?
Rough. It's also that Russ could just see things on the page. He could see reality on a page. He was one of these guys, which have always driven me crazy as an artist, who could just look at a page, a blank piece of paper, and then start drawing something without much layout. For instance, I can tell you, I watched him one time draw a Sherman tank with no layout, perfectly accurate and in perspective. He just really had quite a mind and quite a vision for this sort of thing. I'd heard about that before, but I'd never actually seen it. And he was really amazing that way. I'm going to cut back to that Phantom drawing, and we'll just look at the difference in how clean Russ's style was. And this would have been a drawing for Russ. He wouldn't have had to do much to do that.
Yeah.
Pretty stunning stuff. Yeah, Russ was one of our main designers on. He came in while we were doing the Hulk, I believe, because he helped me design the main characters for that. He did the military guys like Talbot and Ross, and I did Banner and the Hulk and Betty, and he did Rick. And same thing. And then when we moved on to G.I. Joe, he basically just took over the character stuff because that was like perfect for him. So Russ, he also worked on X-Men with us. He helped design all the X-Men characters for the Pride of the X-Men. Let me move on to some of Alex Nino's Ming designs. These are all things that were just idea drawings, but they're really stunning pieces of work. I mean, Alex, if you've never looked at his work, you should look that up. Alex, I believe Alex is still kicking around, and he was a main designer on the animated Mulan and stuff. He's really quite here's another one of Alex's, of Ming. Notice completely different style. That's how good Alex was. And then there was a couple of final things he did. Here's a final drawing of Ming that we didn't completely use. We changed it up quite a bit, but it's a really nice design, and it would work real well in animation because it's just lines with shapes you can fill in that are very simple shapes in a lot of ways. And he did
quite an elaborate costume on Ming, really, isn't it? When you think about drawing 24 of those for a second's worth of vision, compared to someone like the Phantom, certainly.
Oh yeah, it'd be much more time consuming. Yeah, it's what we in the business call line mileage. You know, that's what will hold you up when you're doing a drawing. People think, well, I can do a drawing of Spider-Man as quickly as I can do a drawing of Captain America. Well, you can do them both, but then you got to do all that webbing on Spider-Man. So that's going to be what we call line mileage.
Right. Okay.
Now here's a couple of model sheets of headshots of Ming, which are really stunning. Nice.
Oh,
things.
wow.
So who is the artist on these ones again? Nino.
It's Alex Nino still.
Yeah, right.
And you think that's the one that did this promo piece that I've got as well?
It might be. Alex stuff is generally a little more wild and avant-garde. That look. When you get a chance when we're done here, send that to me if you can. Scan it.
Of course.
And I'll just look at it and I'll give you an answer as to who that is. Here's another one by Alex, which is really delightful. Then there's the final look to him, which was done by myself and Nestro Redondo. Here's one of mine, inked by Nestor.
Yeah.
And here's one of my actual model sheet drawings of Ming.
Model sheet drawing. So does that mean you actually had someone come in and pose for Ming? Is that what you mean by that?
This means I took what we had done before and simplified everything and brought it down to not only a design that worked for the traditional look of Ming, such as the starburst on his skull cap and things like that, but also to define with line everything you're looking at, such as the eyes are completely outlined, the eyebrows are both the same from different angles, that sort of thing. It just has to be really carefully designed. It's something I was really good at in the 80s. I lost an interest for it because it's incredibly time consuming to do this kind of model work.
Right.
It looks simple, but it's not in the end.
So is it almost like a style guide that you're creating with these models?
Yeah, the models are what they work from in animation and in storyboard, and it keeps a cohesiveness to the whole production so that anybody who's drawing Ming knows they have to draw him so he looks like that.
Right.
He's in that angle. And of course, I did complete turnarounds, which have been a full face, front on, 3/4, a side shot, and at least one back shot or 3/4 behind shot. Generally, the most important would have been the 3/4 forward and the 3/4 behind shots, full figure, because that gives you a lot of idea of everything that's going on the character. For instance, if you just get a back shot of Ming, all you're really looking at is a cape.
Yeah. Yep.
So you're not seeing form. And quite often when you are these days especially, doing a model with a cape on, you'll create a form and then draw the cape so that it's see-through. That is, you see the form through the cape, but you see the shape of the cape too. That's very common on model design work from the 80s on.
Okay.
Whoops, let me go to a couple other things Alex did before I go to stuff that was actually production work. Alex did a number of other things for us. Alex Nino, like dinosaur designs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, really cool stuff. There's another one like that. And I think there's another one here. Spinosaurus. And of course, Alex just does what he does. He's not like looking at any reference on this stuff. He's just picking it up as he goes along, but boy, was he good at it.
Yeah.
And let me see, I think there's one more up at the top here. Yeah, there's one there. And maybe one at the bottom. And Alex could just whip these out. He was so good. Is that it? Of those, there's one more alien monster design right there.
Yeah.
Goodness me.
Some of those definitely, I remember some of these characters, some of these dinosaurs and stuff.
Yeah, we would have had him do those for those dinosaurs in particular for a specific episode,
Yeah.
A time travel episode, but also some of them they would find ways, like a character like this would just be done during production just to throw ideas out, keep the dialogue moving, and then later we'd have a group of these things we could go to if we needed aliens or something like that.
Yeah, there was some pretty amazing alien work in the show because a lot of it was in space.
And we had a lot of good designers. These guys I'm showing you right now were guys who I just particularly loved their work, so I grabbed the originals where I could. We had a lot of other guys, like Sean McManus was on the show. Mike Sikowski was a famous comic book artist. He was the original artist on the Justice League of America. All sorts of people were working on the show, and a lot of animation guys too. Now I'm going to go to some of the presentation and, actually promotional stuff. This was done after the show was completed, and we needed like logo drawings and or promotional pieces, such as here's one that was used for the show where the logo would pop in over it when we got to that final music sting, Defenders of the Earth, and then this would come on the screen basically. That's penciled by me and inked by Nestro Redondo.
So what we're looking at, if you're just listening to the audio, is the picture of the globe with the Mandrake, Lothar, Phantom, and Flash Gordon standing behind it. That's a fantastic piece, isn't it?
Hold on, I got one more that's even better that we did together. This was a promotional piece, and this is really a stunner in my opinion. This is me and Nestor again, but man, he just killed it on this. He just did it.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, that is amazing.
So that's a montage, I suppose, of the entire group, all of the kids, all of the heroes running towards the screen or towards the viewer, with Ming and some pretty nasty spaceships in the background as well. That's
that's one of the robot, the spidery robot was one of Ming's minions, and the other thing is one of Ming's ships.
Yep.
And I've got one other thing here. I've got an actual title card from the first episode of the show. This was the very first episode, and I drew this, and again Nestor inked it, and it's actually multiple pieces. There's a background card with the space stuff on it, and there's overlays with Flash and the interior. Then over that is a cell of the creature chasing the kids, and the another overlay cell, which is the rock stuff you're seeing.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the paintwork of the rocks in the foreground. That's just amazing. Like, it's like just the work and detail in that, and then you've got the cleanness of the of the actual drawings of the characters and that. So you've kind of got almost like a mix of two different mediums there.
Yeah, and we had a bunch of good guys doing these. Will did some, which other people inked. In fact, there's one that didn't make it onto the show. You can see it online, but there's one of the Phantom close up on the card, and then he's holding one of his pistols, and behind him is, I forget I think it's just a jungle shot behind him. But originally, Will had done a rough, and the artist Gray Morrow had done the finish work. It's just gorgeous. And the producers didn't like it. They asked us to redo it. They didn't like Gray's style, even though he was one of the great comic book artists. We did one of these for every episode. So we had guys like, I know Sean McManus did a couple of them for us. He did some really gorgeous stuff. And a whole bunch of guys worked on them, because by the time we were in production, Will and I had no time for this stuff. And Will actually was pulled off to work on Gem at that point, the girls rock band show. So other than that, I can show you one more piece, which is just something I did a couple of years ago as a commission of the Phantom.
Which has made it as a trading card from the most recent Phantom. So this
Exactly.
Gallery Series 2.
Yeah,
Yep.
so this is the Phantom running over with Skull Cave in the background, running over a log, and that
Yep.
card is number 46. If you've got the trading card series in front of you.
I don't have them, but I'd love to have them. That would be great.
Yeah, well, you've got to pass them on its way to you, and so I think there's a couple of the cards in there as well. So we can.
But what was the guy's name who did it? I've forgotten what his name was.
Glenn Ford.
That's it. Yeah. Did he ever like put any of them online where you can just find them and look at them? You know.
I don't think so.
No, I'll talk to you after the podcast, but yeah. Now, is it possible for you to go back to the drawing that you've got of the 4 characters over the world?
I'm sorry, the 4 characters over the world. Yes.
Yeah.
Where have I got that one? There we go.
Now, I've got to do something that I wouldn't normally do, but we'll see how we go with this. Now, I just ask about that because I'm not sure if you can see it, but I'm just showing you I'm just showing a Defender's Clawcopter that was actually the UK version. That drawing, the logo looks very, very similar to what you've got there.
That's it.
Yeah. Then if you look at the US version, it actually doesn't have Lothar, and it's got the Phantom in the middle, which is a front-on view. I'm not sure if you can see that.
I can see it. I mean, I can't see it well, but I can see the design, and I can see that it's the same thing. Yeah, and it always had the logo in front of it. This is just the preliminary design. I mean, the preliminary drawing before it was painted and so forth.
Yeah, so I just wanted to show you, I guess, that drawing as actually in production in an actual something that
Was that a toy, a box or something? What was it?
Yeah, so that was so there's two different versions of that logo for like the toys and the figurines and stuff. So there was the UK version, which was done by Rainbow Toys, which has got Lothar in it, and then there's the US version, which was done by Gallop, or Gallob, which has just got Mandrake, the Phantom, and Flash in it. It doesn't have Lothar in it.
Excuse me.
You might be able to see that a little bit more clearly, Rick.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome.
Just the 3 characters.
Yeah, and then you've got the one with the 4 characters like that. So, so yeah, that's pretty cool.
Fun.
Yeah, I think seeing those sorts of variations of the logos is the sort of things that really spark collectors' interest, because then you say, well, I need to get one of each sort of thing.
Yeah.
These things were passed along to King Features, who was working with a toy company or multiple toy companies, I'm sure. So they would do what we always have done when we do style guide work, because I've done tons of style guide work for Lucasfilm on Star Wars also. And they just are told to use these drawings as the official look, but they're allowed to alter things here and there. So that's why Lothar obviously is taken out of that. And I wouldn't doubt that Marvel at some point created that triptych as opposed to the 4 guys here.
Yeah, okay.
Awesome. So now there's an episode, the title of the episode is called Root of Evil. Now, the reason I raised this one is because the characters and the art all look really, really different. Now, I know it might be a bit of a stretch remembering back that far, but would you have an idea why, the art would look really different? Like even the main guys look different. Would that been like the first... Would that been like the pilot that was created, or?
That's what it would have been. Something like a pilot or an early episode that they just felt they had to use for time constraint purposes. So they went ahead and just edited it together and did the best they could with it. But yeah, they to sell a show like this, they would have had to do some animation. And King Features, as I recall, was throwing some pretty good money at them. So they would have been doing anything they could to get this show sold for them.
Yeah.
And that's more than likely what it is. I'd have to go back and watch these things because I haven't looked at them in years. The only one thing I've seen recently is Will Mineo recently sent me I think it's a Google one of their PDF things that has a ton of the storyboards from the show in it. Have you seen this?
Yeah, I've seen it. We've actually got a on our with one of the things that we do like a preservation project where we add things like storyboards and stuff that would normally be lost, or newspaper articles and stuff. So one of the things that we are doing is downloading some of these storyboards to put onto our phantom preservation project.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's.
You want me to cut away from this and go back to the screen? It's up to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just.
So some of the things that you've just showed us would I'm not sure if you would give us copies of those to be able to add to it as well, but they're amazing.
Oh, sure. I'll just send you scans of this stuff. Sure.
Yeah, it's
awesome.
It's amazing having a look at that and like the working.
When we get done here on Messenger, give me an email address because I can do this easier with one of those file transfer protocols that I can do. I can just reduce it and then send the whole file to you.
Of course.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Rick. And I guess on behalf of the Patreons in particular, who are the people who support us and have access to that preservation project, they'll love being able to check that out and take the time to look at it, all of that great artwork you've just shown us.
Yeah, and the actual reproduction of these is nice. I mean, they're real crisp and clean.
Awesome. Can't remember what I was saying.
Take your time.
So you were just talking about you haven't rewatched some of the episodes. I'm not sure if you know, but there's a Facebook page, Comics Kingdom, that has once a week they've actually been showing a episode on their Facebook page and like re-showing it. So so for those who haven't watched it before or haven't watched it for a while, make sure you go onto Comics Kingdom Facebook page, and they've been doing like little events and stuff there. They're good fun watching it. I actually watched one the other day during my lunch break to kind of get myself into the mindset for today.
And for what it's worth, Rick, Comics Kingdom ran a poll to see which Phantom animation they should show, whether it's Defenders of the Earth or Phantom 2040. And Defenders of the Earth clearly was the more popular and got the Guernsey.
As I remember, that Phantom 2040 had a really bizarre style, didn't it?
Yeah, it was
certainly very different.
Yeah, I think it was a French one.
Yeah. That's the one I'm thinking of. It had just kind of a long, stretchy look to the characters and stuff. Yeah.
It was an acquired taste for sure. Some people really, really love it, and for others, they prefer the more traditional, similar, I guess, to what your version is. Oh
yeah, when I do this stuff, I want to stay as close as I can to the original characters. Every time it goes off base for me, it always leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And I love watching some of the old stuff, but there's having worked on it, there's moments when it's like walking into a haunted house or something. Because I have all these fans who love Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, but good God, those are hard for me to sit through. I can see every mistake in them. I hate the voice recording, even though I think the voice actors are really good. I just think the recording is terrible in most cases. And Defenders was better. We were getting a lot better as we went along there. G.I. Joe was really a step forward for all of us. It was really, because that we got to do, it was almost total freedom, and it started a whole wave where we got Defenders of the Earth and all these other shows where they were trying to sell toys, which was actually a godsend to us in animation. We weren't stuck with a funny animal in every show and, bad gags and terrible villains that didn't have anything to do with the characters. These were all much more faithful things.
Have you seen the toys and some of the other stuff that's been created from Defenders of the Earth?
I have some of the original release toys in with my toys that are put away someplace. I have a ton of old action figures and stuff. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I got most of the main characters from that.
Yeah.
They're not packaging. I mean, I would have taken them out because The kid in me always wanted to take
the one that I showed you before, Rick, is in packaging, but only because it is the original, and I'm not sure if you can see it. It's right here. This was probably my favourite toy growing up. This was my introduction to the Phantom, actually, in terms of a toy or a collectible. I was reading the stories, but yes, I've only got that one in packaging so that I've got a nice version of the one that I played to death.
Now, what did they have the knob on the back for? I forgot.
Yes.
That was so that he can punch his arms like that. So
That's it. Yeah.
So that figurine was actually released in the UK, but it was also released in Italy as well.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never been, I never have followed the, what gets distributed outside the US, but these characters are much more beloved around the world than they here in the US. Same thing with Tarzan. Tarzan just isn't appreciated in the US like the rest of the world appreciates it, basically. Because there's nothing like a white man running around in the jungle,
Yeah, it can lead to some awkward conversations.
I still love Tarzan. I read the books again recently, the early ones that are really good, and I went, damn, these are good stories, and you can really believe this works for what it is.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Phantom. The Phantom is a character it's easy to relate to, and it's easy to say, yeah, I can believe that. I think that could happen. It's easier than like Flash Gordon, which is so out there.
What was it like, and I guess this is partly a writer's challenge as well, but for yourself as an art director, like bringing together those two very different types of stories? I know they're all in the King Feature stable, but as you say, very relatable through to so outlandish, and you found a middle ground.
I think it's because they put it all in the world of Flash Gordon. I mean, making Ming the main character, it made the others have to become science fiction characters along with, well, you can't call that science fiction, it's fantasy, but it put them in his reality more than him entering theirs, such as Flash Gordon he would be out of his element in the jungle stories. But what was really nice is it allowed them to do those sorts of stories. Like there was a number of stories set in the jungle with the Phantom and stuff. As I recall, there were individual stories, at least one of the Phantom. And
There was the Phantom battling his brother, which was I think episode 4 or something. There was the Sky Band, which as well, which was a group of bad people or villains from the Phantom stories.
And that was what's great about working with King Features is they wanted us to integrate all of that stuff.
Yeah. And I know when I first watched the series from start to end, as a 22-year-old, and I was a Phantom collector and a Phantom fan then, those stories really helped me enjoy the overall TV series more because it had that heavy Phantom influence, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think Flash Gordon is not as interesting without all those people around him, like Dale Arden and Dr. Zarkov and those characters, Prince Barrett, those characters. I think they make it much more palatable. Mandrake can fit into a lot of things because he was basically just a detective we get right now.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed the TV series. It's I was a little bit upset when my daughter was watching it because she was watching it without me. Like we started watching it together, and then I'll come home from work and she's watching it, and I'm like, "What are you doing? You're supposed to wait for me." And by then she had watched 4 or 5 episodes.
Eating on a binge watch, it's nothing like. I always hate that when I ask my wife, "So should we watch the next episode of whatever it is?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm already on episode 8."
So, where does Defenders of the Earth the TV series, where does it sit? Looking back over your career, you said that you've retired from animation a year and a half ago. Where does it rate in your long list of accolades and TV shows? Like, is it one of the better ones that you've done, or Like
it's one of the most important ones for the prime reason that it was the first one where I really had so much input and was a director on the show. I really got to learn how to direct. I knew the basic way to do it, but when you do hands-on every day, you begin to realize all the work that goes into it, what's necessary, and you also begin to realize how hard it can be. But I also just like the characters, and I enjoyed working on it. I do have others that are more my favorites. I would say Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, X-Men, and in particular, Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes were just really joys to work on, especially Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which we did about 10, 12 years ago. That's just so faithful to the material. It was just a pure joy to work on. And it animated really well. Very nice.
Mm. So
but there was a lot of shows I worked on. I worked on, the first Spider-Man, the animated series, which was a really good show in the 90s. The 90s, everything got a little more, there was more being done as far as quality of production. But a lot of that happened because of what we did in the 80s. We kept pushing them for better stuff. You can see a definite quality jump from a 70s show to a show like Defenders of the Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And some guys just had more money, like G.I. Joe. Hasbro threw money at it, so it always looked pretty damn good.
Mm.
Yeah. And I guess everything's a product of its times, isn't it? If you were doing Defenders of the Earth today, then the CGI and all the rest of the technology that's available would mean that it would necessarily look pretty different.
Spaceships and stuff would be awesome because they can make a CGI thing out of that, a CGI prop out of that, and then when it's gone through its final process, they run it through a filter that just puts an outline around it, so it looks like a drawn element, but it moves like a 3D object, and that's astounding. This show, though, was really important for me, and I would keep it in mind over many others, because I worked on so many shows that are totally forgettable and were done because I was trying to make a living at the time. I worked on a show called Turbo Teen, which was just a wretched piece of film. And I worked on Mr. T, which was also pretty terrible. A lot of them along the way, you just have to, make a living and wait for that more special moment to really enjoy it. But you still got to put the work in, and you got to do a good job. Yeah. But honestly, in the 90s, there's probably dozens of shows that I contributed to that somebody'd have to go, you remember when you worked on this? And I'd go, no, I don't. But if you don't think I did, I probably did.
I'm glad you remember Defenders then.
The reason I don't remember all the episodes is because I haven't watched them since I first after they were released. Some I have, like the Prince Valiant show I saw recently, like a year or so ago. And I just wanted to watch it because I had such good memories of it, even though I have to stand back and go, oh, God, we could have done better there. It's just your nature not to be happy with what you've done.
Of course. Yeah.
Of course. Dan, I've run out of questions. Dan, do you have any other questions?
I think we've covered so much stuff. Has the conversation sparked any other ideas for you, Rick, that, things that...
I think you guys have pretty much covered everything. The only thing I always was, we had a particular character in mind for Mandrake when we first started this thing, because we were all movie fans and such, and the Phantom was always going to be the Phantom, and Flash Gordon was always going to be Flash Gordon, but Will Mineo and I really wanted to do the old actor William Powell as Mandrake the Magician. He's one of my favorite actors. He was in a lot of great 1930s films like My Man Godfrey and things like that. The Thin Man. He played the Thin Man in Thin Man films. And so we had the great comic book artist Dan Spiegel draw up some drawings of him, and they were just spot on with him looking like William Powell, and King Features would have nothing to do with it. Damn. He would have
I think... from a King Features point of view, Mandrake is pretty iconically based on Lee Falk. So perhaps they did didn't want to step too far away from that, I suppose.
Oh, they made the right call. This was fan stuff that, you know, young in a business like that, your fanboy comes out pretty fast. You know, like it took us, when we were working on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, we browbeat the whole studio about putting the X-Men in that show until finally near the end of the first season, we did an episode with the X-Men. And they finally got it. They went, yeah, this is interesting. But yeah, the fanboy in me always comes out in this stuff. Even today, there's stuff about it. You know?
And I think we can see
what I know about the character.
Yeah, I think we can see the fanboy and the collector in you in the way that you just grabbed a few little pieces of design art and that sort of thing as you were going through, as you like them, and we appreciate and thank you for sharing those with us today as well.
Yeah, they were amazing.
Pleasure to share it because I don't show it to many people.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that. We really do. Before we go, do you? I know you're in retirement and all that, but do you accept commissions? Can people contact you? Yep.
Yeah, what I do right now is basically commission work, and I do take a gig once in a while, but I have an ongoing thing with a company that does work for Microsoft, and they call me about once a month, and I do presentation storyboards for Microsoft, which is very lucrative and enjoyable to do. And I don't have any of that angst I would have drawing a character like the Phantom or Spider-Man. I draw it, and I don't have any emotional connection to it other than I just like drawing. But yeah, I take commissions. That's what I do a lot of the time.
Awesome. Well, I know you've got. I know you're doing a commission for myself as well, so I appreciate that as it comes through.
Yep. In fact, I'm finishing up one right now, and I should be ready to start on something for you.
Awesome. All right. Well, that will be very. I think probably the package that I sent you is probably still stuck in transit somewhere.
Right. You wanted to send me the actual board to draw on.
Yeah. So they probably haven't arrived yet.
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, with the current climate, they're probably stuck in transit.
Everything's slow as hell around here now.
Yeah. So,
I'm the only one in America who doesn't. It's not really bothered too much about this situation. I mean, I'm more than willing to follow the rules, of course, because it's got to be done. But my whole life for the last 30 years has been living in my house, working out of my studio. So what's different for me? Not much. If I want to go to work, I've got work right here.
Yeah. We've got a few artist friends, and a lot of them have said very similar as well. It's just, isolation is what they've been doing their whole life. Yeah. So we really appreciate your time today, and showing us everything and letting us go back to our childhood and our younger selves, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of listeners as well who would be getting a real nostalgic feel at the moment after listening to you share about a much loved TV show. So on behalf of myself and every other listener, I just wanted to say thank you for your time today, Rick.
My pleasure. It was actually a lot of fun talking to you.
Good stuff. Thanks very much, mate.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick.
Nice meeting you guys.
Cheers.
Thanks.
All right. So if we just press stop on the recording.
Yep.
That was really good. Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, really.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun. So don't forget to send me that presentation piece. I really want to see who that was.
Yeah.
I'm seeing this stuff, and quite often things were done that we didn't see because they were part of negotiations between King Features and other departments.
Yeah, no, I'll keep it out and I'll take a scan and I'll send it over. I'll probably send it Monday, is when I'm back at work.
Now I guess I better get to my other job, which is cooking dinner for this evening.
I've got to race into a meeting at work, so I've got to go. So yeah, thank you very much, Rick. I really appreciate it.
Take care.
Okay, good on you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Wow, that was really good. It's just myself at the moment. Dan's had to duck off as well. But I hope everyone really enjoyed that. I know I did. It was amazing looking at those pieces. But yeah, no, it was really, really good. So a huge shout out to Dan who joined us, but also to Rick, who was able to join us for a good hour-long discussion about the TV show. So So thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening to that. Now, if you've come in late, we are thechroniclechamber.com. You can find us on the website, chroniclechamber.com. If you want to email us or talk to us, you can do that via chroniclechamber@gmail.com. For social media, we are on Facebook, which is chroniclechamber.com, and we've also admins of the Phantom Collector Group Facebook page as well. On Twitter, we are at Chronicle Tweets. On Instagram, we are also at Chronicle Chamber. Now, if you've come to us because of the Defenders of the Earth, or you're a fan of Rick and the work that he's done as well, you can find us on iTunes. If you're an iPhone or an Apple user. If you are an Android user, we're on many of the other apps like Podbean, Player FM, Castbox, Listen Notes, as well as Spotify. Is it Spotify? Yeah, Spotify as well. So now we made mention of Patreon users. So Patreon is basically Patreon is a website where people can sign up and they can help sponsor and help donate some of their money to be able to help us run things. So basically Patreon does things like pays for all the bills, like using Zoom, the website hosting, the website domain name, and a lot of the other things we do as well. So a lot of those things that were shown in the YouTube version of this podcast will be up on our Patreon side of things, along with this promo piece as well that we were talking about as well, and some of that other stuff as well. So that will also be up there inside the next month or so as well. Now, if you want to learn more about Patreon, you can go to our website and there is a link on there as well. So as we go, I just wanted to say thank you for everyone who listened to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. If you did watch the TV show and you enjoyed it, make sure you drop us a line, a comment on either Facebook or one of the other social media platforms, and let us know what your childhood memory of that show is as well. So until next time, thank you, happy phantoming, and stay safe.